Illinois' unfunded pension liability growing from last year, $1.5 billion, and is now the second highest pension liability that the state's had since 2020. When it was $144 billion. But the latest Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability report showing that Illinois' pension debt continuing to grow. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning. Let's take a look at this report, and you can find this at COGFA's website. It talks about the funding ratios of the asset smoothing or without asset smoothing. And it seems that everybody wants to point at the without asset smoothing. So if you look at the most recent chart here, you'll see that the unfunded liability for fiscal year 2024 was $143.7 billion. All right, so that's the total in millions. We're looking at the report here. And it's at 46% funded. All right, and it breaks down the different funding ratios for the different state agencies. Now, one thing that I want to make sure is clear here: these are just state employees that are retirees. They do have the teachers' retirement system, which are all the state's teachers outside of Chicago, but everything else is state employees, state universities, the General Assembly retirement system, the judges' retirement system, which if you look at the General Assembly retirement system funding ratio, it's the worst, 24.6%. But you do have this $143.7 billion number here. That is higher than it was last year by $1.5 billion. Let's take a look at this chart here. You've got, over time, 2010, $85 billion of unfunded liability. By 2020, it got all the way to $144.2 billion of unfunded liability. Went down to around $129 billion in 2021, but then started ticking back upwards. Now we're back at 143.7, and that's in billions. So we're back up to close to the highest it's been, and we'll look at some more information here. But Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked about this earlier this week at a news conference. Here he is talking about pensions.
Yeah, we'll have a separate press conference on pensions. How about that? But we are better funded our funded ratio for our pensions is much better today than it was when I took office, and it's continuing to go in the right direction. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Again, the governor talking about pensions. I connected with Wirepoints President Ted Dabrowski to get his reaction to the latest COGFA report, and he had some interesting takes.
Well, the pension report's showing that despite these massive market rallies, we've had massive stock market rallies, our pension debts keep getting worse. And that's really the result of politicians having done zero to make things better for taxpayers. And, these are big numbers. The S&P recently had their number at $172 billion. And, what you should take away from that is this means massive property tax hikes, massive income tax hikes if we're ever going to pay that debt down. And it also means people are going to get chased away from Illinois. So until the politicians change that, just expect more bad news for Illinois in terms of taxes and outmigration.
So just how bad is this? When I chatted with Ted Dabrowski from Wirepoints, he spelled out some of the other stories that aren't part of the COGFA story, which again, COGFA is a independent state agency of a commission of bipartisan House and Senate members. So it's equal members Republican, equal members Democrat, but it's a state body. There are other independents, third-party, non-government that look at these things as well, and Dabrowski paints that picture from those other reports.
Well, let me tell you one other story, because implicit in all that data was just how well our neighboring states are doing. You can look at the nearby states where we have, and I'm going to the S&P report, which gave us all 50 states to kind of back into this COGFA report, but. Our neighboring states like Iowa has $2 billion in debt. We have $172 billion in debt. Michigan $8 billion. Indiana $11 billion. You can add up all the debts of our neighboring states. It's only a third of what we have, and yet. Sorry, I should say that differently. Yeah, you can add up all the debts. It's a third of what we have, and they're 3 times larger in population. So you've got this massive amount of debt in Illinois. And no real plan of how to pay it down other than to just keep hitting taxpayers with some of the highest property taxes in the country.
And if you look at some of the charts at the COGFA reports, which I'll bring back up here, this chart is, a lot of detail, and it's the funding projections for the state retirement system, all 5 of these systems combined. And it shows for the fiscal year 2025, the total contribution for state tax dollars, $11.2 billion. All right. And that's an unfunded liability of 143.4 with a funded ratio of 47.4. So that's for the next fiscal year. Then you get into 2026, which the funding ratio ticks upwards slightly, but so does the amount of tax dollars going into the pension system every year. So this is annual contribution. But as you can see, the number of unfunded liability upwards to $144 billion in 2028. Then it starts to trend downward with under $140 billion by 2032. But if again you look at the total annual amount that's going in, that continues to increase. And the total annual amount going in continues to increase all the way up to $18.5 billion by 2045. But the funding ratio will continue to increase all those years to get to 90% funding. So the annual cost, again, continues to increase. Dabrowski chiming in on that.
Yeah, so it's going to be a drag, it's going to be a drag on our state budget around 18 to 20% for the next, 20 years. And, hopefully while we're waiting around for all the good news to happen, that everything is paid down and all that, the question is going to be how much have we lost in people, companies, to outmigration because of these costs. And, our politicians are playing a very dangerous game with our great state because a lot of people, as we've already seen, aren't waiting around, and a lot of people won't wait around. And we may have not seen the worst yet, and that's the problem. So, this $144 billion debt that COGFA reports, biggest in the country. No other state compares with us. So this is a really dangerous game our politicians are playing by not reforming pensions.
We'll talk a little bit more about pension reform, but I asked Dabrowski also to talk about how this isn't just a state government issue. This is impacting local governments that have their own pensions to manage and handle.
Yeah, this is, we talk about the state issue, but every single Illinois government right now is being hammered with this. Our police and fire, our teacher pensions, all those things are impacting property tax bills at the local level. And you're seeing a situation that you're not seeing in other states like we have here. And you're talking about cities like Decatur and Peoria. All these cities are getting whacked and they're raising taxes to try to pay for pensions. And some have created a pension tax. Again, if you travel to any of our big cities, not Chicago, but the other cities, they are all struggling with their economies, with their tax base, with their manufacturing base, and this debt hanging over them will just make things worse.
Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday held a news conference. Unrelated, he was asked about pensions, so we heard him from Wednesday, and then hear Dabrowski. Now we're hearing Pritzker from yesterday, and here's what he had to say about the pension situation, and in particular, the idea of enhancing pensions for a certain class of public employees hired after 2011.
Let me say this. I think you've heard me talk about the fact that we have to meet what's referred often to as a Social Security
equivalence.
Yeah. Equivalence before, in order for it to sort of meet the standards for the state not having a larger liability. We are not no one is exactly sure what that amount is. The estimate, I've seen several estimates, let's just call it $3 to $6 billion total over a 20 plus year period. So that is something that has to be done. I know there are people who would like to add other things on to a bill like that, but and that's, I think some of those things are included in this bill that you're referring to. But I have several things on my mind when I think about this. I think most especially maintaining our fiscal responsibility in the state of Illinois. We already have a significant amount of pension liability and payments that we make. But we've been managing those properly, and you heard me say, I think yesterday here, that our pension funded ratio has been improving every year, or in total over the last 6 years since I took office. And I'm proud of that, and it's something that inures to the benefit of everyone in this room and everyone at home that is a resident of the state of Illinois. So that is something I don't want to let go.
Again, you got the governor there
I think
talking about the pension situation, the estimated cost of Tier 2 changes. What about those Tier 2 changes? Dabrowski estimating this could cost taxpayers billions.
Yeah, it's funny. We should be talking about how we cut the pension debt, how we figure out how to reform pensions so they're not so big. And, we've talked a lot about how big some of these pensions are. But instead of doing that, right now our legislature is debating how much to increase benefits on Tier 2. And, and what's amazing about that is that there's some plans that want to increase benefits a lot, and that just absolutely ignores the taxpayer, or they just think the taxpayers are going to pay for it. And, some of these Tier 2 plans increase costs for taxpayers by billions, some, as much as 80 billion. And so we're not going to fix Illinois until we fire a bunch of those politicians who refuse to talk about pension reform. We need a constitutional amendment, so we need to get that on the ballot. We need to let the public vote on it. And then assuming that we get a pass on that, we need to lower pensions and create a new retirement system going forward.
Again, thanks to Ted Dabrowski for chatting with me yesterday about the COGFA report, getting more on pensions. I'll have to share some more of that conversation with you about the economic policies that might need to be changed and how pension reform should be top of the list, according to Dabrowski. So a lot more to tackle on all of this. Again, later on this morning, a House Pension Committee is going to be holding a hearing about enhancing Tier 2 benefits. We'll be watching and reporting here at Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning.